Round. Oh, thank you very much. Amazing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good stuff. There we are. Well, can I just say, you are all the very hardy ones, clearly, who have made it through the wind and rain to get to Blundell Street. So well done, everybody. It's fantastic to see you all, and particularly to see you at this event, Stronger Together for Better Jobs and Better Work. We published the Stronger Together report on Sunday, and that was after a huge amount of work right across our movement, so with our affiliated unions, with hundreds of Labour Party members, with our affiliated societies as well, including Labour Business, and also learning from what Labour is already doing where we're in power, including in local government. So we're going to be talking today about what we need to do to, as a country, be a country where we have decent, well-paid jobs in every part of our country, jobs that are unionised, where people are able to raise a family at the same time as working, ultimately to have decency and respect at work, where a proper day's pay comes from a day's work, rather than the situation we've seen over the last 12 years, where, as many of you will know, we've seen living standards stagnating, and now, of course, real wages falling. And I think particularly over the last 24 hours, we all know quite how much damage right now is being made to workplaces up and down the country because of the reckless approach of the Conservatives. And we know how they've been seeking to blame working people for their failure. So it will be excellent to talk about how we can set all of that right in government with this panel. It's a small panel at the moment. Angela Rayner is going to be making it a bigger panel very, very soon. She is joining us, coming through the wind and the rain. But I'm delighted that I've got with me two people at the moment who have a huge amount to say on these subjects. First of all, Phil Macaulay. So Phil is the Vice Chair of Labour Business. Phil just informed me that Labour Business is actually 50 years old this year. Not Phil himself, of course, he's only 21, very clearly, but Labour Business, of course, is the organisation for business in Labour. It's played an incredibly important part in our policy review and our policy development generally, and of course up and down the country, particularly with the business liaison officers, those bureaus that many CLPs have, and we've got some other great members of Labour Business with us today. Phil has been an elected member of Gedling Borough Council, he's been a parliamentary candidate, and he's a serial entrepreneur, so he's been involved in a huge number of different businesses, particularly latterly in the music industry, so it'd be great to hear from him in a moment. I've also got with me a woman that many of you will know, Lisa Trickett. I've known her for a very long time now, from Birmingham City Council. Of course, the biggest council in the country, one which has a more direct impact on many people's lives than indeed many government departments. Lisa has been spearheading the work of the council when it comes to some of those really, really difficult cost of living challenges for people. Done a huge amount of work around family services. She's co-convener of Birmingham Food Justice Network and chair of the Active Wellbeing Society that ran the food relief operation during the COVID period. She's also co-chair of CERA, and we're very grateful to CERA for co-sponsoring this event, as well as Labour Business. So I'll ask, first of all, Phil to provide some thoughts. Great, and Ange has joined us now. Welcome, Ange, looking amazingly not weather-beaten, which is incredible. So that you can settle yourself down, we'll have Phil to offer some thoughts on better jobs and better work. Might pass to Angela after that, if that's all right with you, Angela, for your thoughts as well. And then on to Lisa following that, and then we'll have a good chance for a really, really good discussion after that. Brilliant.
Thank you, Annalise. Good morning, everybody. How are we all after last night's party time? All good? I can see a few weary faces here. So thank you, Annalise, for that introduction. Yes, I'm a serial entrepreneur. Doesn't mean I grow cereals, of course. It means that I've set up and built up and employed actually thousands of people in the last 30 years of my entrepreneurial journey. And I was reminded of the fact that when I first became something called the Industrial Fellow of the University of Nottingham, which is a grace and favour title they give you if you've taken a company public, so you'll come back and talk for free to the students. And they said, how are we going to attract these students down to hear about how to start their own The answer is that if you find out, don't tell anybody else. That didn't go down very well with them, but it is true that on the entrepreneurial journey you've got to take lots of risks and try lots of things. And the first thing I want to say is Labour's done an incredible job on this report, and you should all read it, as I have in great detail on multiple occasions, because it sets out a framework for good governance, for how to behave in a radical, futuristic economy that takes care of people and provides opportunity. I think it's a good summary of what we've got. I've taken a couple of particular notes I wanted to mention from an entrepreneur perspective. One of our key commitments is to have a new employment bill, and it's very, very important that that includes the self-employed. I just want to emphasise this. We've seen all the IR35 messing around over the last few years. It's been impossibly difficult for anybody to actually work for themselves without huge complications and working out actually where you stand, what you should pay and to whom. And there's been a whole industry sprouted up to sort of manipulate that and keep people in the dark, and it's been problematic. So it's important in the Bill of Rights, and it's my request that there's a proper section in there which gives very clear governance about self-employment and the self-employed rights. And that includes contractors, it includes startups, on all of those good environments, because we're all working, we're all contributing to the economy, and we should all have fair rights at work, even if it's our own thing, which protect us in terms of health and safety, regulations, rules, and all the frameworks that governments do well. So that's an important ask. So it's incredibly important to enable entrepreneurs. If we're going to have good work and good jobs, then we need to support young entrepreneurs, particularly in inner city areas, particularly from minorities and diverse communities, to have the money and also resources they need. It's never been a surprise to me, having run the audit committee of a reasonably large council, to realise how many buildings lie empty that are owned by the public sector, whose doors should be opened to entrepreneurs to go and run their own start-up businesses rather than pay outrageous prices to commercial operations. Countless square footages in the ownership of local authorities could be used for that purpose. What have they got to do? Turn on the lights and plug in the computers, and you've got entrepreneurs doing a startup who can't afford to rent a space in a city and get going. And while I'm having a rant about that, business rates, goodbye. I remember having a consulting office in Nottingham, my hometown. It was $15,000 a year to rent 2 offices, and guess how much the business rates were? $16,000 a year. It was more than the cost of the rent. And Nottingham City Council's paying themselves very well, and it was very unseemly to see a situation where they were really screwing businesses up on that sort of basis. That's not acceptable as a socialist. If you're going to have business rates, it needs to be measured on the basis of the performance of the business, and it needs to be on a means-tested basis. If you're going to pay anything at all, you need to contribute from your income and from your returns, not from a flat poll tax, which is what it has been. Why are our high streets empty? Nobody can afford the business rates. Never mind the risk of opening up. Never mind that Amazon doesn't pay a single penny in tax except what it's negotiated in the city to keep the regulators away. It's an outrage that there's not an equal playing field for entrepreneurs when you've got everybody so used to ordering things overnight. They're not paying tax in this country, they're doing transfer pricing. That has to end under a Labour government. Did you know that over 200 billion a year leaves this country through fake invoicing of overseas companies by large groups? That is a fact. Let's hope Kwasi Kwarteng wakes up. I think he's become a verb, has he not? I've been looking for one to describe them, and now we have a new one, which is excellent. I just want to go on to say local authorities have a really important role to play in enterprise and entrepreneurship, not only making spaces available, but making prudential, low-cost finance available. Why aren't we in the business of investing in our new local enterprises and helping them do what they need to do? Why is the answer no? You know, if you go and get a full-time education in the UK, you leave with 50 or 60 grand's worth of debt. That debt gets loaded on you. It's unsecured, okay? You're not credit checked, but you've got to pay 60 grand back. But you can't go and get a £10,000 bank loan to start your business when you've finished your enterprise degree because you have a bad credit rating. What kind of an economy are we living in? I think students should be paid to learn, frankly. I think we need to overcorrect the situation, incentivize people to learn, whether it's at a university or a technical college or a digital polytechnic. Yesterday, I was privileged to host some of the business roundtables with some of the big businesses around the country. One of the big things we picked up yesterday, and it's very, very important, is that the government needs to put together a place on the internet where every citizen can manage their own lifelong learning. A portal where you have an account, where you can access free training, resources, connectivity and opportunity. It doesn't exist in this country. It does exist in some other countries. In the United States, they have the Small Business Administration. If you want to borrow some money there, guess what? They don't put it on the public sector borrowing requirement. Private enterprise provides the money, but guess what the government does? It underwrites the loans that they make. They have a less than 3% default rate and put $50 billion into startups every year in America, and that's why they've got a thriving entrepreneur sector, and we haven't. So there are some working models that work, which we can steal the clothes of and improve for a UK context, and we should do that. And all of those things are very important. And as a final kick of the game, you know, what is government for? Well, it's for us. It's for us to thrive. It's not a thing on its own over there doing something. It's there to serve us, and that's all we want to happen. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Phil. Huge amount of food for thought there. I'm sure that we'll have a really good discussion about it when we go on to the questions. I'm now delighted to have with us our Deputy Leader, Angela Rayner. As many of you will know, of course, Angela announced Labour's New Deal for Working People at last conference, has done a huge amount of work on that, on better jobs and better work, really exciting measures around the self-employed and procurement over the weekend as well, and those new fair work measures also. So it'll be brilliant to hear from you. Thanks a lot for being with us.
Thank you, Annalise, and I want to start by, first of all, saying thank you to Annalise and the work she's done on Stronger Together, because actually if you look at how we've knitted all of our policies, if you listen to Rachel's speech yesterday that was very much wedded to what Johnny Reynolds was saying and what he's doing, connecting different our policy announcements and government together, that's why we're a government in waiting, because we're all working together. So if that's the work that Annalise has done on bringing all of those components together, the work I'm doing with Ed Miliband, we're all kind of not seeing it as one department. It's the whole of our government that is going to be lifting and working with business and with the public sector, all elements of the public sector, whether that's the regional, the nations, our mayors, our local authorities, is about making sure all levers of the public sector are looking outwards to support communities and support our social values and making sure that businesses get a fair crack at the whip. And, you know, Phil's absolutely right in his comments that those social value elements that Phil was talking about, whether that's around skills, whether that's around, well, what's our economy being driven for? What do we want to produce and how do we want to produce it? Is it linking to our targets around climate change? Is it linking to our targets around infrastructure and security for the UK? Is it linking to the new technologies and the entrepreneurs? And is it working for the businesses of today? And is it working for the businesses of tomorrow? Because at the moment it's disjointed, dysfunctional and prohibiting that inspiring entrepreneurial nature that I think is quite unique to the UK and has always set us apart, and why we've always been one of the world leaders is because we do have great entrepreneurial spirit in the UK, and we want to unleash that potential. And I'm hoping that many of you last year, and for a couple of years, has been, you know, challenging Labour, quite rightly so, on what we're doing for the self-employed, what we're doing for entrepreneurs, how are we supporting medium and small enterprises, how are we making sure that there is a fair, level playing field for business and for people in this country. And I'm hoping that with the speeches you've heard this year, that we're very serious and we've listened and we've got the answers to that. So in my speech, I talked about the self-employed, contracts, written contracts, making sure that people, the late payments was legally binding. So we heard that that was one of the big challenges. In the procurement strategy, making sure small and medium enterprises get get a fair crack at the whip there, and that we're able to push public procurement in a direction that speaks to our values as a nation and means that employers that want to do the right thing can be rewarded for that. We want those businesses to do well, and we want them to be able to grow our economy in a far more sustainable way. And this is what's so why I'm so passionate about fixing all of, not just the policy announcements that I think are in the right place, and making sure the economy grows in a sustainable way. You know, the real living wage that Rachel talked about, that me and her worked on over the summer, was working with business. Again, the scrapping of business rates was about, again, listening to how we can level the playing field and make it much more fair and productive. And I'm really optimistic that not only have we got a plan to solve the problems we face today from day one, if Labour gets into power, which hopefully we will very soon, it's also about how that builds for the future of the UK, because we can't have, I mean, we used to think short-termism was a couple of years, now it's 6 months. It's like, how can a business survive and plan if you don't know how you're going to be supported and what's going to happen after 6 months? And that causes shocks in the economy as well. Not only is it difficult for business, but it's also an economic problem when the market has got no confidence that we know what's going to happen. I mean, it's not even, I'd say it's even 6 days at the moment, the way things are going, which is just not a way to run the economy and to support business and to help us thrive. So I'm really pleased the work we did on the New Deal for working people. It's pro-business, it's pro-worker, it's pro-self-employed, it's pro-entrepreneur, and it's pro-skills, and it's pro-UK, and how we're going to make sure that all areas and all regions and all nations of our country are not held back. So I'm incredibly proud of the work that we've done, and it is the work we've done. I'm literally very good at plagiarising other people's great ideas. That's how I've got on. Some of the media who can be quite brutal about the fact that I left school without any qualifications, but one thing I did leave and got a master's in is knowing when someone's got a good idea, and instead of thinking I feel intimidated by that person having great ideas, thinking that actually the best way to make me shine is by allowing other people to shine and sharing ideas. And that's what I think my job and my role is in what will be the next Labour government, is stealing your great ideas, listening to them and making sure we put them in action so that we can all thrive together. Thank you.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much indeed, Angela. That was terrific, and really delighted that we now have a voice really from the coalface of many of these issues from Birmingham. As I said, Lisa has been working as a councillor and with lots of community groups and organisations for a long time. It would be terrific to hear your thoughts on how we can secure better jobs and better work.
Okay, thanks for that, Annalise, and thank you, colleagues on the panel. I think where I really want to start, and it won't surprise you, as given I'm co-chair of CERA, is, first of all, to absolutely welcome that the Labour Party this year, we feel greener, fairer future. I am so excited. I feel like Christmas has come. That actually, having spanged on for years about you cannot talk about green unless you talk about inequality, unless you talk about justice and how it impacts upon people's lives, and to have that sort of the two objectives in the one slogan actually does show to people we get the need for balance. And again, in terms of fairness, actually our approaches need to be fair for business, they need to be fair for workers. Fairness runs across the piece. I think one of the issues, I come from a large industrial city, and we have many different neighbourhoods, many different communities. And we often hear, quite often male politicians go banging on about the green industrial revolution, how we're going to create these high growth, high value jobs. What you've actually got to remember is that for some of the communities that we serve, actually the communities haven't actually recovered from the last deindustrialisation and past transitions. We've actually got communities and businesses that are suffering from globalisation, casualisation. And when you actually start to then approach technology, automation, Brexit, and then you start to say, net zero, actually they look at their cash flow, they look at their workforce, and they do not see a future for them in that. So to me, very much, you actually have to understand where businesses, where communities have come from, if you're going to take them on that journey to the future. And I actually think that we've heard a lot across the fringe events through the leadership speeches about transitions. The key for me is we're not on about one transition. We're having many transitions, and you have to start at the point that people are at. It is no use assuming that communities are ready to actually come and join this journey with us. And again, I think Andy Prendergast got a bit of a difficult time in here because he had to sort of support fracking, and clearly that's something that we cannot do. I absolutely have total sympathy with the unions. Unions are there to actually protect workers' pay and conditions. If you cannot show where the jobs are going to grow, where the jobs are going to go, and how you're actually going to support that pay and conditions whilst you transition those jobs, or support those businesses who need to transition so they don't go belly up, then you won't take them with you. So absolutely, I think we have to get to a point where with the unions we're not looking at a directional approach, we're looking at a negotiated approach, and we're actually starting to work through a transition that is real and relevant to the communities and individuals they serve. And again, I think this is where I'm always keen about honesty. You know, we have to be honest that jobs will go. Automation means certainly the communities, some of the communities I work in, I've been doing some work on net zero future in Castle Vale, housing area that grew out of the car industry. That will be massively, massively affected. But there is a possibility, given the housing stock, given retrofit, given that it was built in the 60s, 70s, it has the same housing profile as many estates across this country. We can do place-based skills, work development. We can encourage the entrepreneurs. We can reach out to the self-employed. And again, when we talk about self-employed, remember, many brickies are self-employed. That actually a lot of the industry that's going to be involved in this zero carbon industry transition are self-employed, and we have to again find the bridge for them to go through. And fundamentally, really in conclusion, what we have to do, and I've probably said it several times over in this talk, in many ways our communities face a triple jeopardy. They didn't cause the problem, they're going to have to pay for the problem, and sure as hell, at the moment, they don't see how they're going to benefit from it. So if we are going to win the next election and take those communities with us, we absolutely have to show co-benefits and shared risk. And that's where, again, what I really want to hear from a Labour government, and I want to hear from business, is the role of the public sector is not to de-risk private enterprise. The role of the public sector is to work across sectors to bring the best out of everyone to deliver on a better future for us all. And business has a key part in that, and let's start working together effectively in our local communities.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you very much indeed, Lisa. Again, a huge amount of food for thought. And I'm going to open it up now for any questions or comments that anybody has, anything that you want to raise. Excellent. Great. So we've got a number of people already, and a roving mic. Fabulous. Great. So I can already see 3 people. So maybe if I could take the woman right at the back, in the middle right at the back. Oh, who I think is Sarah Boyack. Yes, one of our amazing MSPs. Great. Sorry, it's a bit dark in here. That's why I can't see who people are. Go ahead.
Well spotted, Annalise. Yeah, I'm one of our MSPs in Scotland. Can I just say it's brilliant to... Have I done something to this? No, it's working. Can I say it's brilliant to have had both our deputy leader and our party chair at a CERA meeting, because it actually gives the politics of a fairer, greener Britain is just centre stage for us. And I was very excited to think about that link, the win-win between local communities and businesses. Could we hear a bit about community-owned energy that could be led by councils? Because I know councils are under massive pressure, but the transformative nature of a Labour government doing the political leadership and the sharing of knowledge, I think could be fantastic. And there are exceptions where you can see councils doing good stuff, but it needs massive leadership and it's a lot of risk taking. If we could share the experience, it would create thousands of jobs, it'd be good for local business. But during a cost of living crisis, planning ahead for a green energy future, I think it'd be something that only Labour is going to be able to deliver. Thanks, Annalise.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Maybe if we take questions in groups of 3 so that we can get as many people as possible. Gentlemen in the middle, the mic is coming to you. There we go, thank you.
Hi. So the Tories have put in schemes to cut carbon emissions, like fit payments for solar panels, insulation schemes, etc. But these schemes have run for a while and then been cancelled. So how will Labour provide a long-term, stable set of regulations for green growth that business could work with?
Brilliant, thank you very much. And then last question just over here.
Hello, Mike Reeder from Northampton. As well as being a director in the construction industry, I actually volunteer as the Chief Operating Officer for the Association of Proposal Management Professionals. So we're represent the 12,000 people who were the villains of Angela's speech on Sunday, the form fillers who work in procurement trying to get the best deal for the public purse. One thing that definitely came out in what Angela was saying about procurement is the need to do a better deal for small business, which I think I completely support. One of the biggest challenges we face, though, is the lack of skill and capacity, particularly in the public sector, local government, NHS, housing associations, in structuring procurement in a way that it encourages small business to engage. There is a myriad of standards and process and procedures. Every single authority runs things differently. It becomes almost a nightmare for businesses to try and work across a breadth of clients. So could Labour commit to supporting developing those skills in procurement, commercial and legal, to make sure local authorities feel supported and also have the power to fight back against businesses that do use legal methods to push through deals that are uneconomical for the taxpayer?
Brilliant, excellent. Well, some really, really important questions there, and I might cheekily, as chair, come in at the end as well, just to offer a kind of front bench Labour perspective as well. But maybe if we start with yourself, Phil.
All really great points, and the answer is as follows. Yesterday in the Business Forum, one of the really interesting things that came up was the discussion about research and development funding in the UK. Labour has committed to 3% of GDP, broadly speaking, going up from 1.7 billion to 3. That's right, isn't it? Yeah. Now, the gap between those two figures, that money should be distributed to local authorities to invest in their local communities against the framework, in my opinion. I don't think you should just throw good money after bad. What is wrong with the R&D process is it's completely unfit for purpose. And what came across at the meeting is as follows. If you're a company and you are somewhat reliant upon some grant funding or support to carry out your R&D, particularly applies to new green technologies, unfortunately, what you've got to do is raise your money, spend the money, and then go into R&D bingo with the state to figure out whether or not you're going to get some of that back at some point. It's a ludicrous system. It's designed to favour the vested interest because they, bizarrely, are the ones who can afford the resources. To your point about procurement, the cost of bidding, the bidding culture, to me, needs to end. It needs to end and stop. It's unfair, and it's completely loaded, and it's corrupted by lobbying. It needs to change. And so that has to go. We've got to redesign it. And I think the gap between what we spend now through those, I'm going to say it, corrupted methodologies that happen. You know yourself, if you're involved in that, you know how much the big companies have got whole bidding teams and consultancy groups doing their bidding, spending tens of thousands to win enormous government contracts. Why? Because everyone's too fearful. What if they go broke? Well, hey, Carillion, hello. Let's not throw that around. If we're going to support local businesses, government has to take risk. Government has to underwrite business, not undermine it. It's very important we take that message away, very key. So procurement is the answer. You know, we mentioned how are we going to do it? Well, let's do it like that. Let's have, you know, a small business administration with an office in every local authority, with a support team to provide resource to entrepreneurs for bidding if we're still in that ludicrous position, and let us ring-fence certain contracts as a percentage of what's available for companies of small and medium size. And then let's help them make sure that they're financially fit for purpose to do the work, and let's support them in that and turn them into sustainable companies. It's all doable. Doesn't have to cost the state any money on GDP because the market can provide the money, the state can underwrite it. It's just another form of prudential borrowing, truthfully. But it gets repaid out of success and default rate is low. So that would be my solution.
Great, thank you very much. Lisa.
Okay, I'll work backwards through those. I think I'm on the record of several times actually saying that public procurement will be the death of innovation. And I think it is the death of innovation. It also absolutely favours huge amounts of money going into project management and large consultancies rather than actually where the innovation is. I think an example locally where it really fulfills what Phil was saying is in the West Midlands we have a sewage treatment plant, Minworth, that has the capability of heating 30,000 homes. We have a number of companies that are interested in partnering with the combined authority, the local authority, local communities in developing that. The problem is, under the current rules, ultimately they're going to have to enter into a beauty contest. So actually, who's actually going to take the risk? Who's going to stay the course? And it'll be the one who's actually got the most sort of financial acumen, the right people behind them. Not necessarily the organisation that's best for the communities that we serve. So again, the ability to actually fund collaborative approaches and procure collaborative approaches is going to be absolutely key. You cannot do place-based transitional change unless you actually have collaboration, and that requires totally different procurement. In terms of the different grant regimes and funding regimes, cancelled, promoted, not promoted by the government, I served on a heat commission recently, and a senior official in Bays admitted that everyone knows that the current grant programmes aren't going to actually achieve net zero. They're not going to work, but we have to look like we're doing something. The problem is that looking like you're doing something is actually losing the confidence of business. It's losing the confidence of the public because nobody actually knows what's going to be funded, what's going to be developed. Do you invest in the fabric? Do you invest in the heat pump? Do you actually invest in the advice? And nobody's actually funding, going back to Phil's point, the institutional architecture that's actually needed to make some of this happen. We lack in our localities the capacity and capability to turn the trick that's going to help us on this transitional route. And then to my CERA colleagues' comment about community energy, we cannot carry on using the same approaches in the way we invest and sustain our cities and communities that have failed in the past. We have to look at mutual ownership. We have to look at shared benefit. And community energy is an absolute way to do that. We're working in a number of communities. I work for a small but perfectly formed co-op that clearly doesn't do well with public procurement, but does actually do well with partnering with universities. But we've actually been working with the Red Co-op in Manchester, and we found ways where we can structure localised community businesses that actually close the gap on retrofit and actually address now the heat gap and the funding gap that is needed for communities. But it requires thinking outside the box. It requires small changes to the way we do things. But that's what we've got to do. We've got to rip up this is the way we've always done it and actually accept we're going to have to trial and we may fail. But failure's okay if you learn from it and then apply it to the next stage of transition.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Lisa. And from my point of view, Mike, you're not villains, right? You're the solution, as far as we're concerned. And actually, I think there's some excellent practice, genuinely, in procurement, but it is variable. And we've just been talking about all the issues there, quite rightly. I mean, I think part of the problem, as with, frankly, many kind of regulatory and financial issues for local councils, is we've had such a short-termist approach to local government funding in particular, that actually, people cannot rely on that work, so they go elsewhere, unfortunately, because of that funding situation. Obviously, we've said as Labour we'd have a very different approach. We wouldn't have those short-term funding settlements. We would be funding it properly. But I do also think there is a chicken and egg here, because for those smaller businesses, if the rules aren't set up in a way that they think they've got a decent chance, then they're not going to be seeking out that additional expertise because they just think that it's not worth the candle. So I think it is right that we're saying very, very clearly now, we will change the shortlisting rules. We will guarantee there'll be a place, for dependent on the contract, but where we can do that for those small businesses, and that we will be putting social value in. Of course, the government could have done that. I mean, we kept lobbying them, as did many businesses actually, and unions and others, when they were redoing the procurement rules this time round, made a huge fanfare about it, but they've not included social value, and they should have done. So we will make that change. Around solar panels, yes, absolutely. And we've been incredibly frustrated by the regulatory, just kind of, enormous U-turns from side to side, or, whether it's on energy efficiency, actually, or whether it's on solar that we've just seen recently, this ridiculous, turn away from solar, against onshore wind as well, where we saw the switch away from that. This is a great way to destroy confidence. Fantastic. You couldn't do better, actually trashing investment plans that have been created because you suddenly change the regulations around them. That's why we've said now, at this conference, we've got that 2030 target, and we are going to be backing those different renewables. Solar, wind, onshore as well as offshore, hydrogen, and also new nuclear. Now, I know that there'll be different views around that maybe in this room, but we believe we need to give that market certainty, and we need to do it now. So that's why we've signalled those intentions right now, and we're going to stick with them, unlike the government chopping and changing constantly. And then Sarah, absolutely, I think there is a real need to be sharing that experience, and we've got some great examples of that kind of work, absolutely amazing. Of course, the government, again, haven't helped because they've been changing some of the tax rules as well, and doing so without properly consulting, and that's led to potential for some investments being lost. But I also think that, again, having that target set out there hopefully will be building confidence around this, and it's one that kind of reflects the urgency of the situation. I mean, I've found it very frustrating. We've got some of the, in fact, one in particular, very successful scheme in my own city of Oxford. We have the low carbon hub in Oxford, which has been crowding in sometimes local authority investment, but also crowdfunding as well, share offers and really innovative forms of finance. But we've also had 2 huge pilots, the biggest green energy pilots in all of the UK, 2 of them in my city. They're both pilots, one based on a decentralised energy distribution system, Project Leo. The other one reliant on the grid, our super hub. So you've got 2 pilots in the one city on a fundamentally different basis, and they're pilots. We shouldn't be at the stage of pilots. We have a climate emergency right now, so we need to have that kind of ambition, and we need to be supporting that kind of community action. Great. So, any more questions? Excellent. Good. So if we could start with the lady there. Yep, yes, behind you, that's it.
Thank you. Brenda Allen from Hornsey and Wood Green. My question is about the role of local authorities. I think Phil mentioned business rates and how they would need to be tailored to this, and also the potential role of local authorities as lenders, small banks supporting businesses. But given the condition many local authorities are in, having lost so much money, and thinking my own local one, what's Labour's policy for local authorities in terms of beefing them up, giving them powers? how they get their funding, how they can raise money, because a lot of this depends on them if we're going to have local solutions.
Thank you very much, Brenda. So, yes, just women there. There we go.
Hi, thanks. Emily Clayton from Greenwich and Woolwich. We know that there's been an increased inequality between the productivity of businesses, not only across kind of regions and industries, but within regions and industries. And we also know that this is one of the big drivers of wage inequality too. And one of the associated factors is low technology diffusion. How do we make sure that we don't repeat the same dynamic when it comes to the green transition, that we don't put kind of opportunities out there for businesses to take up, but actually it's only one set of businesses do that and others fall further and further behind? Thank you.
Thank you. And gentleman over there.
Hi there, Michael Ahanshian, Labour Business. Another thing that I noticed, I was at the Labour Business Forum sessions yesterday as well. Another thing that we were hearing loud and clear from businesses was the need to be more joined up about our approach to internships and apprenticeships. And given the goals that we have when we're in government, what are we going to do around that? Because I think there's such an opportunity there to create a green lens on internships and apprenticeships.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much indeed, everybody. Maybe if I could start with Lisa first, if that's all right.
Thanks. Okay, I'll start with the role of local authorities, and I must stress this isn't, what I say is not necessarily Birmingham City Council's view. I'm speaking more as Places in Common and co-chair ACERA. I think there is a real difficulty for local government, and a number of us were talking about it last night, that we have had to manage through austerity in such a way and try and keep the show on the road that we've almost layered complexity into our own financial systems. And one of the things that local government has absolutely got to do when we're preparing for a Labour government is to look at their long-term financial plans. Because, for example, in Birmingham, we're making an assumption that we're going to make £100 million a year from the sale of our land receipts alone. That is massively stupid, because actually if we looked at those land receipts and reinvested them back into structures and models to actually support community regeneration, to support business, local business and enterprise in those areas that need regeneration and repurposing, we can actually grow our local economy. And it's as Keir says, you grow from the bottom up, not the top down in the way the Tories are. We as Place in Common have been developing a sort of programme drawing on a lot of European learning. And let's face it, Europe does do this a lot better than us, capital accounting. And we actually think that what we've got to stop doing is talking about the problems in communities, but talk about the assets, because actually it's the assets that we can harness and truly start to actually look at, be them physical, institutional, social, cultural. They're our levers, they're our policy levers, and we then have to actually then look at how we can close the gap. In terms of inequalities in productivity, I think I'll let Phil really talk to that one more. But what I would say is, again, it's about investing in the training, the skills development, the tech that's going to make the difference in the community. The most stupid example we had in Birmingham was the HS2 college. It was built in the heart of Nechells, one of the most deprived communities you will find in the country. And it was for level 3 skills and above. This is an area where actually we have the high schools exclusions. We have high issues of mental health, huge deprivation, transitional communities. Nobody was near level 3. No wonder that college didn't get any takers. It took a local college to actually talk to HS2 and say, actually, you're going to be digging the roads, aren't you? And actually what you're probably going to do is you're going to actually give some opportunities through that, first of all, for some of the people in our communities. And then what we want to do is, once they've learned to dig the roads, we'll take them to the next level. We'll take them to the next level. And what we've now got is a potential pathway where people can grow their economy and grow their skills alongside. In terms of internships and apprenticeships, absolutely. I mean, the apprenticeship levy, Kickstart, you name, I mean, there's so many organisations competing for Kickstart, and actually what's happening now is it's almost becoming cheap labour for the graduate market. Graduates aren't getting proper salaries. They're now being offered Kickstart. And actually what we need to do again is to pool apprenticeship levy, Kickstart type initiatives, and create that pathway. A lot of the work we're doing at the moment is around the River Cole, Tame Valley, and actually what you could see is you could have a green apprenticeship where again you are taking people through from exploring the land, exploring nature, but gradually building enterprise and developing their own businesses. And again, that is what apprenticeship levy needs to go towards, not just actually skilling people up for jobs in companies, but skilling people up to run jobs for themselves and build companies for themselves.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Phil.
Great points. Well, I endorse all of that. It's really good. Just to pick up on a couple of things about this, and I just want to mention this very quickly about, it came up in the Business Forum yesterday, universities. Universities in the UK are brilliant, except for one small fact, and that is that they restrict the release of their intellectual property, because what they do is they leverage the entrepreneurs who do research and development, and then they don't allow them to license out or take out the IP very easily, and it is criminal, in my opinion. I think university release for IP needs to be standardised by government and needs to be mandated. I've seen, even in Birmingham and at Aston, at the European Biomass Institute, they have some incredible green technology. They will not license out because we want our penny. And it's sat there for 9 or 10 years in biomass. What an outrage. Totally wrong. That needs to be made available and forced out there. I'm reminded of the fact that one of my former colleagues at Nottingham University, Peter Mansfield, sadly passed away, who invented the fMRI scanner. We've all had a scan. And he shared with me one day the fact that they couldn't work out the technology, and they'd hired a new cleaning lady to sort out the lab. And when she came in on Monday morning, because she was dyslexic, she set up all the equipment in the exact opposite direction. And for the first time, they saw a scan on the machine because they put the wrong coordinates in, and it gave the breakthrough to explain that technology. Now, they knew they couldn't get money in the UK to develop it, so they just published all the rights. And Fujitsu patented it and now charge £6 million a pop if you want one. And one of the problems in the UK is that we don't understand how to manage our IP for entrepreneurship at all. It's completely redundant. Universities are sitting on millions of quid just in case tenure ends, and yet they don't do a damn thing with it. University of Nottingham has a low energy house that costs 60 quid a year. Why aren't we building to that standard? Yeah, tell me. I don't know why. We know how to do it, we're just not doing it. It's because we're bad at forcing things to happen. Regarding equality of pay and equality of opportunity, let's make it a criminal offence to pay people differently for the same job. One of the worst offenders, in my absolute experience, is the BBC. One of my women friends has been a presenter in the BBC for 20 years. She's paid precisely 30% less than the males doing the exact same job. How do they get away with it? They call it a slightly different grade. Criminal. They should go to prison for that. And I think we need to criminalise inequality behaviour by directors of companies. If you're facing 5 years in prison for paying women 20% less because you can, then you should spend that time in prison thinking about what you've done. So until we start to act tough and get tough, it will never ever change. No matter how much we campaign, make it against the law, make it actionable. At the moment it's not even a civil thing, is it? It's just what's expected. So, let's get tough on the directors of companies. So a new act to govern that could take care of it. And I think finally on this question of joining things up and making things happen, yes, of course. I mentioned it earlier on today. In the entrepreneur space, the Small Business Administration in America generates tens of thousands of new entrepreneur jobs because you can get the money to do your startup because it's underwritten by the government but not paid for by the government. Private investors will take the risk on something working or not because that's what they do. But you can't go and get government money for anything. I mean, the whole procurement thing's a joke. If you've got the greatest idea ever, like fMRI scanning, and you just invented a new company, you can't do procurement because you don't meet the credit criteria. You can't show us 3 years of accounts. And while we're on the subject, let's do away with long-term waste stream contracts, shall we? Some of the biggest criminal offenders in the UK, waste industry, who've got local authorities tied up for 25-year contracts. We know who they are. You only have to search them online to see how many court cases they're in America being charged with their criminal activity. There's no point inventing a green energy technology and not being able to get hold of the waste product to convert it into something usable like biomass. What are we doing? That needs to change.
Goodness, well, a lot there. But just on gender pay, to mention that we already have, as the Labour Party, policy, hopefully to deal with some of those issues, that it should be possible for people to compare their pay across companies as well. Because right now, the fact you're in that straitjacket of only being able to do it in the one company and then being able to take a tribunal or whatever on that basis, we don't think is sufficient. So that is Labour policy. And one final question, if you could make it snappy, if that's all right, and then we're running out of time.
Just on that point, what Phil's talking about is gender pay gap and self-employment, which is an entirely different kettle of fish. And while Labour policy on, what was announced on comparing pay across companies is a brilliant one, it doesn't get to the problem of gender pay gaps in self-employment at all. But I'm working on it. So, watch this space.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that Labour Business will continue to hold our feet to the fire. And of course, yes, when people are employed by their own companies, etc., you have got a different structure there, clearly. Good. Well, look, it just remains to me to say a massive thanks to everyone who's been part of this discussion. It's certainly one of the most interesting that I've had at this conference, so really appreciate my amazing panellists who stuck the course, all of you who've been here for such a brilliant discussion. Please do look at the Stronger Together report if you haven't had a chance yet. It's on the Labour website, and have a wonderful rest of conference, everyone. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.